name is Jennifer. I am an addict in recovery. I have 2.5 years sober right now. I'm a student in Ivy Tech, and in the human services field, I hope to take the experience with my drug addiction and what I have learned and be able to help others in the future. Thank you.
I guess we're going down. You want me to just go?
Next panelist is Leslie
Hagedorn. Yeah.
Hagedorn.
Yes, my name is Leslie Hagedorn, and I am currently a senior at USI in the social work department. So currently, that I'm a successful student, a successful intern, a mom, a wife. But 5 years ago or so, my life looked much, much different than that. And it kind of, just to make it very brief, I started abusing alcohol pretty bad when I was about 14. And by the time I was 17, I was doing drugs regularly. And by 19, I was full-blown in addiction. And my addiction robbed me of 8 years of my life. I struggled with it. And along those lines, I had some legal consequences to my drug addiction, which unfortunately kind of comes with the territory with addictions. And so when I decided to get help and go into treatment, I brought a lot of baggage with me, kind of the wreckage of my past. And some of that stuff is on paper, and anybody can find it. And so I spent the first year of recovery just really trying to put my life back together and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided that I wanted to be a therapist and work with other people that had addictions, specifically women who'd had addictions and trauma and things like that. And so I decided to go about the route through Ivy Tech. I went to Ivy Tech for 2 years, and then I came over here to USI. Unfortunately, I have incurred some barriers and some obstacles along my way because of what has happened in my past. Primarily job opportunities, lots and lots of job opportunities have not been available to me because of my past, and that's unfortunate because I think I look at what I'm doing right now, and I know that I could do some of these jobs very well and that I'm dependable and reliable and responsible, but unfortunately when they run my background, that's not what they see. And when I first tried to get into the University of Southern Indiana, I actually received a letter from admissions. I don't know who, I'm not blaming anybody, it's just part of my journey. But I received a letter that was very discouraging that says, "We will not take you." And that almost crushed me because that was kind of my plan. That's what I wanted to do with my life. And I'd been working at Ivy Tech for 2 years to do that. And that was my first encounter of really having to advocate for myself. And I was able to get an appointment with Dr. Batista where I could, in person, present myself and show what I'm doing now, right? And then they were more than happy to welcome me into the university. But unfortunately, that is what we face a lot of times, that people don't look at what we're doing right now. They look at the piece of paper. They don't even need a face to go with that piece of paper, and you're out. And for those of us in addictions and those of us that have had run-ins with the criminal justice system, that's kind of the case. And so, it's something that I've just had to learn. I've become a stronger person because of it. And I really hope that this will change for the people that come after me, that everybody would be given that face-to-face opportunity before somebody tells them no, because my life is much different today. And I am a great intern and I'm a great student, but it almost didn't happen because of my past. So thank you.
Our next panelist, I know you by your first name, Tiggy.
Jacoby. Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm Tiggy. I'm originally from Mali, which is in West Africa. I moved down here with my father when I was 12. Basically, the only reason I came to the States was just for school. So right now I'm a super senior. I'm an international studies major and a French major, and in the future I hope to go back to my country to work with people with like education, basically women, and make a difference. So that's it.
You never had that problem.
Last but not least, James T.
Wait,
I'm sorry, I was.
with a L.
You would think after having James in class, I think 4 times, I would remember your last name.
It's okay. My name is James League. I am currently a readjustment counseling therapist with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I am a undergrad and graduate school here at USI. Dr. O'Patterney and some wonderful other people in the room had them in class. Before that, I spent the largest majority of my adult life in the military. I spent 14 years in the Army. In that time, I deployed to Somalia in '93. I was in the Balkans in the mid-90s, clearing mass grave sites. And my last trip overseas was 17 months in Afghanistan. When I came home and I left the military, there was a stigma. Just like with addiction, if you're a combat vet, people have this stigma that you're crazy. You have PTSD, that any moment you're going to go off the deep end and shoot people up or whatever. And it was a barrier. When I came home, my first civilian job was working in the Henderson County Jail. It was the best and worst job I've ever had. I walked into a cell of 11 inmates, put my badge on the table and said, all right, who's first? Because they were being disruptive. I was suspended for 2 weeks without pay. And shortly after that, I went to the VA, said, I can't do this, I need some help. I did go to the VA, have been in counseling for about 10 years. I used my education benefits and came here to USI. The staff at USI were great. A lot of them knew that I was a vet, and a lot of times, I would get frustrated in class because I'm 35 years old. The next person in my class is 22. And the things that they were upset about, I was just like, really? That's not a problem. Okay, so, even whether it's addictions or PTSD or being from another country, we're stigmatized. And one of the things that we hope to do, like I work with other combat vets, let's get over this hump to get them readjusted back into the civilian life. Just like you're wanting to do addictions, it's great. We take our experiences and pass them on to others. So, but I've been with the VA for 2.5 years, and my boss is already grooming me to be a team leader at the vet center, either here in Evansville or somewhere else, in the country. And my wife will tell you that there is no job that I've ever done that matches what I do now. Everybody has their niche. This was mine. And I hope to be back working with USI some more on some policies. And, if you guys have questions for me, I'm here.
Thank you so much for sharing your stories. We hear from the testimonies that were given that many of our students, many of our faculty, our colleagues, we get stigmatized from our past events. And so what I would like to do today is open up a discussion how that stigma has affected the lives of these individuals. If you would have any questions, I would like to open it up and encourage a open discussion with some of the issues that they have faced and how they're looking to better themselves and their lives. Does anybody have any questions for our panelists? No questions? Oh, okay.
I'm just curious because I've often heard faculty comment on faculty who move into this area, and I don't know, James, are you originally from Henderson in the area?
Actually, no, I'm not. I grew up in North Alabama. My first duty station was at Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And I met my ex-wife who was from Henderson. We were married for just short of 3 years. During that time, I made the biggest mistake that any husband can ever make to his wife. It was not to cheat on her, not directly. What I told her is I married the Army first, and I did. I often put the Army before my wife. We had a son together who is now at Fort Bragg in the Army. So when I left the military, I came here to be close to my son, and that's, you know, I wanted to be close to my son. I'm very proud of my son, and since that time, I have 3 other kids, and I've made it a point to come back and stay here because I knew what it was like as a military brat, jumping around every 2, 3, 4 years.
That was kind of my question is how do you integrate into the community? Or how did you, I mean, I know you spoke about the faculty, but what about with students? Because you're a non-traditional student, was there some difficulty in?
Actually, yes, there was. A lot. Because I had students that, you know, fellow students that, you know, they knew their friends that, you know, they went to high school and they went to Central or North, or they had friends all the way back to Tompkins Elementary School. And you know, my wife was one. So when I came in, I felt very isolated. And it was actually, I had knee surgery my freshman year, and it was the spring of my freshman year, and we had an ice storm. I was on crutches. I had an English class that spring semester, and I happened to wear my U.S. Army hat. And it really upset me because I had students that just kept walking by me, and I'm going from where my wife dropped me off to the liberal arts building, and there's ice and snow, and I'm on crutches. And I had, you know, all these students that would look at me and go, that must suck, and kept passing me. But it was a Marine, and for me being Army, to get a Marine to help me out. And he walked up behind me and grabbed my bag and said, no, come on, let's go. And it was another veteran that I had somebody to, you know, link up with. During the course of the 5 years I was here at USI, my wife would call me or text me, and it was funny because it's Eric time. It's his lunchtime. This is Eric time. This is the time that we sit down and we, you know, laugh and joke around about our military days. But since that time, now USI has a Student Veterans Association, and Joel Matherly is working with the Veteran Support Services, which is, you know, I know Joel. Joel is a great guy. So
that fills that niche.
That fills that niche. And
Katie, do you have any experiences as coming not just from another country, but even from Indianapolis to down here?
Like bad experiences, or?
No, I mean how did you find the USI community, like students and classes and
Well, like my freshman year, like I had a really hard time, you know, like connecting with people who haven't been really outside of Evansville, you know, because, you know, I move around a lot when I was younger, and then I come to Evansville, you meet these people that don't even know where Molly is. So I had a really hard time with that. And then towards like my sophomore year and stuff, I discovered the International Club, and I met people from all over the world, and that was like my comfort zone. Like I was happy to meet people like, you know, that traveled and speaks my language basically. Yeah.
are you guys both from Evansville?
I am. I'm from Evansville. Yeah.
I am too.
What I would like to ask both you, Leslie and Jennifer, what challenges have you faced as students?
Do you want to go first?
I can.
Okay.
I think when I first decided to go back to school, my major challenge was that I was still fairly new to recovery. Relatively, you know, it was still within like 2 years. And so My recovery has to be a priority for me every day, even now after years, you know. So I think when you spend years of your life in an addiction, your problem solving skills aren't really great. Your ability to manage a lot of stressful things is not so great because I'd never really done it before. So learning how to balance my recovery with work and school, and learning how to just balance life, period. You know, like, I think that was probably because it was important for me not to get overwhelmed, because that is kind of a danger zone for me. So I think it was finding support within the colleges, both Ivy Tech and here, faculty support primarily, and just learning, taking baby steps and learning how to juggle all of this stuff, this new stuff at one time.
Yeah, I certainly do agree with you, Leslie. There is an isolating component with addiction, and I spent a good deal. I spent 25 years in addiction. So when I went back to school out at Ivy Tech, it was the whole non-traditional thing. I didn't know anybody. I wasn't acclimated to the campus. I wasn't really good with problem-solving strategies at that point, or even social skills. And there were many times that I felt, alone in it, although there were a lot of people around me. But there would be days that I would, struggle to just leave my house, to get in my car and drive there, to park in the parking lot and then get out of the car and go up the steps to my classroom. For me, that was more of a struggle than the actual material that we were covering. I always just felt different, alone. Am I good enough to be here? Am I worthy? Can I do this? And then I think probably with my experience at school, I mean, the people over at Ivy Tech, they are just wonderful. So they really are encouraging, and that is just golden to me. But there have been just some patronizing comments, not from the staff at Ivy Tech, but some of the students, and I think it's just from ignorance and just not understanding. When they'll ask me, well, how did you do on that test? And I, say, well, I got, 100%. And they're like, well, wow, that's really doing something, especially since, you're an addict, or think of what you could have done if you hadn't spent all those years in addiction, or, I think and sometimes I'm not sure how to take that, isn't my achievement, isn't the 100 on the test good enough anyway? I mean, aren't we somehow equal here as students? Or, do I always need to work harder than you to make my point here? So, in some cases that can be kind of hurtful, but you just have to brush it off and move on.
I think, just to add on to what Jennifer just said, I think that was definitely true for me too, that I felt like I had to be an all-star to make up for all those years that I fell so short. And I still do that. I don't want an A, I want a 99%. And it's getting better, but there is this feeling of having to overcompensate, for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm curious, for all of you, how much of the struggles that you encountered do you think were policy-based, and how much was just social norms?
You start down there.
Yeah. I think a lot of mine were just social norms, because whether you turn on CNN or MSNBC or whatever, a common thing that you saw was, there's some veteran that's holed up in a house somewhere with his family and he's threatened to kill himself, or some guy walks into a store and starts shooting people. Oh, well, they find out he's a veteran. That it became, it is more social than, and I know for me, than policy.
Mine is both, socially, trying to hold on to my cultural values, and then integrating that with American culture, and with friends. For example, with my American friends, when we go out, I have to explain to them, hey, I have to call my dad constantly, tell him kind of white lies, with so and so, because culturally our parents are super strict. And then with my African friends, I don't have to explain that to them because our parents are the same, you know. So like I have a curfew. My dad doesn't care if I'm 25, 30. If I'm living with him, like I have to let him know when I'm coming back home, you know. So he's forever going to be strict with me. And then policy wise, like when I wasn't a citizen of the United States, there was like a lot of stuff that I couldn't do because I was not a citizen. So things like that.
I think I've probably had experiences with both. It's generally university or business policy that shuts that door right off the bat. But something really great has happened policy-wise for those of us that are in our situation, that in Indiana, the expungement and sealment records stuff, you know, and I have been fortunate to be able to have done that in the last 6 months, which is a huge just blessing from God, that I don't have to carry that weight with me anymore or talk about it if I don't want to. But policy is definitely a barrier for people who have had a criminal background. And then as far as students go, I haven't found that face-to-face. I have a lot of prejudice and bias coming from classmates. However, when I hear them talking together and they're talking about, I would never want to work with addicts. You know, that's a population. I don't understand addicts. Just different little, and most of them don't know, you know, because I don't just share that. And so I hear that quite a bit, which can be a little frustrating sometimes. But for people with a criminal background, I think policy is a big part of it.
Okay, I might have a little different perspective, but I feel like that as far as the social norms and policy, it was a lot of those policies and structures that helped me to turn my situation around. I don't think that I would have stopped using had I not went to jail, and I don't think that I would have got the quality of treatment that I did get without going through drug court. So I mean, in a way, I just think those are true. And it depends on how you look at it. If you feel like they're out to get you, then that's the way you're going to treat it. If you feel like, you know, I can turn my life around from here, and these people are here to help me, and you accept, just accept their help. And they have plenty of options and referrals, and there's Vanderbilt County in this area has a really strong treatment community. So where I can see that in some ways policies and structures can be bad for me, without those, I would not be here talking about recovery today. So.
What kind of programs did you have to go through to recover and actually push yourself to, get an education and,
Okay. Well, I had a lot of professional help. I come out of the Vanderbilt County Jail. I went into Ruth's House, which at that time was a residential treatment program, and I stayed there for 9 months. I was on probation as a condition of my bond. So in the meantime, I had the people from the probation. I had a great public defender. I was starting to build, my family relationships back. When I left, and that's when I started at Ivy Tech online at that point. I've had a job coach. I have my own personal sponsor. I have a mentor in the community. I have my own therapist. I had case management from probation and through drug court. There's just been a lot has fallen into place for me, so that I almost have like an expert at every turn, that can guide me.
Yeah, my father struggles with addiction, and I'm trying to find programs to implicate in his life. He's going through stepping stone right now, and I'm trying to be there for him, and I don't know if there were people there, like your support system that you're talking about. How were they there for you to help you through the emotional battles and obstacles you were facing? I'm sorry, that's personal.
No, I want to make sure that I understand the question that you're asking. I have a hearing deficit. Could you just repeat it for me?
Well, my father's going through stepping stone, and I'm trying to find ways for me to be there for him, to be supportive.
Okay.
I'm struggling with myself,
Okay, through a stepping stone, I had an instructor that worked there, and I went to one of their seminars. It's a craft. It kind of helps family members to understand how they can help their family members in recovery. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because a lot of times this is a policy issue that who is recognized as far as the supportive services in regards to families. You know, who can receive the counseling. You know, who, and in our times we have, you know, extended families, we have split families, we have grandparents raising children, we have many different facets of who is playing the supportive role for the person in recovery. For me, I was just extremely blessed. My sister, who is here today, went to bat for me when I was in jail, and she actually got me the interview to enter into Bruce's house. And then she was always just there for me, either through a text message or a word of encouragement, you know. And it is like Leslie said, it's baby steps, you know, just little at a time. But I just want to commend you on just the desire to want to help and be there. But there are models that incorporate family members, and a stepping stone should be able to give you that information. It's called CRAFT model.
Also, just to add on to what Jennifer was telling you, Alcoholics Anonymous has like a family group called Al-Anon, and I've heard really great things about it, and it kind of will give you information about how to be supportive without enabling, which is really super important. So I don't know if you're familiar with Evansville. Okay, well, like Old Stone, which is on Walnut, has an Al-Anon room that they have meetings. Stepping Stone has Al-Anon meetings. So that would be something that would probably be pretty helpful for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What was your most turning point and you decided like you wanted to change your lives around? Was there like one kind of like key moment, or was it just like a big series?
Well, I would like to tell you that when I got arrested that was my turning point, but it was not. For me, I hit what we call like a bottom, my own personal bottom, which for me was being homeless. I mean, basically. And I had, it was around Christmas time, and I had been telling the people that I was running around with that I had to get clean, like, on Christmas Eve so that I could go home to be with my family on Christmas Eve. And I kept saying this over and over, I guess maybe trying to convince myself that that's what I was going to do. I'd never miss a Christmas. And then one day, I'm sitting in a house with no electricity, everybody's high and drinking and whatever, and I say this again, and somebody says, Leslie, it is Christmas Eve. And that was, for me, that was that moment of clarity that I needed, because it was like, what am I doing, you know? And it actually, I reached out to Stepping Stone at that point in time, and they did not have a bed available. And they said, you know, just wait a week. Well, when you're an addict and active addiction, you can't. I mean, it's almost impossible to wait a week. So I went back out for probably a month, and then they finally got me a bed. But just hopelessness, loneliness, and I had come to the end of myself. I had no more ideas. None. And that's when I sought treatment.
Yes. I think for me, I like to just call it a divine intervention, if you will. Because when I went to jail, and as a condition of my bond, I was not to go back to my house, or the house I was living in, which would have been, just a big trigger for me. That's where a lot of drug activity was going on. My partner at that time was in addiction as well, and I don't think that I would have been able to recover. So I call that a godly intervention, in that I just couldn't go back there, which put me at right away. I think it was within 2 days of being of leaving the jail, I was at Ruth's house in their structure program. So.
What are some of the stereotypes each of you guys have faced, on your journeys through life? Starting from you, Jennifer, all the way to you, James. Like, what are some things you guys have faced that are stereotypical and that may have kind of set you guys back?
As far as stereotypes, I just think that there's some people treat me like I'm dirty or stupid. I don't think they understand just how hurtful that can be, or every addict's a junkie. Well, I've never shot up, but there's that whole, the whole cloud that comes along with it. So, and those are kind of some of the stereotypes that I face. It's just the ability to go about life and do well and make changes when you're labeled an addict. Some people just don't think you can move past it.
I think that in general, there are some pretty basic stereotypes that people have of alcoholics and drug addicts for sure. People may not be willing to say it out loud, but they've walked down the street and said, I bet that person's a junkie, I bet that person's a crackhead. I mean, people do that. Mm-hmm. And I think knowing that that's out there is one thing. And then for me personally, the stereotype was kind of like that it was a choice for me, that I just was a person that couldn't make good choices, that I was totally selfish and just a party girl and whatever, just kind of like this whole idea that I've wasted all of my God-given talent, right? But I mean, when you're in the middle of it, you don't feel like you have a choice. So even now, even with some of my really close family members, if we talk about my addiction, they still think that it was my choice. They still think that I was just going through some weird phase where I couldn't get it together. I mean, my mother even. I mean, that's still where they're at. And so to not be able to feel understood by the majority of people can be difficult.
Well, you guys already know like all the ridiculous stereotypes people make about Africa. When I was in middle school, like it really, really affected me, to whereas like I wasn't like really proud of like being African. And then as I got older, like coming to college and stuff, I embraced being from a different part of the world, and just saw like the positive side of it. Like, I mean, I speak more than one language than most people. I always say that, and just I don't know, just like embraced it, and I got over the fact that not everybody is like privileged, to know everything about everything. So it was my duty to like teach people about, when they ask me ridiculous questions, I have to like take a moment and be like, okay, like, answer them politely and stuff like that. So yeah, that's really it.
I think the biggest stereotype that I've had to deal with has actually been within the last 10 years. I grew up in North Alabama, so if you're a middle-class white kid in North Alabama, everybody thinks you're racist, and I'm not. But within the last 10 years, probably a little bit longer, but roughly about 10 years, multiple times when I walked down St. Louis was one of the most hurtful for me. I'm at the zoo with my two kids, and a lady walks away with her grandkids, and she goes, "Don't get near him, he's a baby killer." And, being called a murderer because I'm a vet. And, it's very difficult to explain to people, I will tell you now, and I will tell you in 50 years, that have I ever killed someone? Yes. Do I know positively that I've killed them? Beyond a shadow of a doubt. Is it something easy to live with? No. I remember it every night. I take really good medication to help me sleep. But getting over the stereotype and the stigma that if you go to war, you've had to kill someone, and that you are a horrible person and you're a murderer. That's really hard to get over. And when I always remind myself, and I have a very good friend of mine that reminded me of this, and it was a quote by General Patton, and it kind of makes me feel better sometimes. But he said, it's a wonder that the American people don't know the horrors that men do in their name. I would not ever wish war on anyone. But, you know, going there, I did my job. It wasn't easy. I came home and I try to raise my kids the best I can. But people still have that stereotype that whether it's a Vietnam vet or a Desert Storm vet or Iraq vet or Afghanistan veteran, that you're crazy and you're a killer. So that's what I have to live with. And that's about the biggest one that I have to live with.
What is, this goes for everyone, what is like the one sentence or one thing that you wish people would stop asking you or saying to you in regards to your stereotype? What is the most annoying thing that you just wish people would stop saying to you?
I smile because it is always, as soon as I'm a baseball hat freak, and actually Barb and everybody can remember because I always wear a baseball cap and it says U.S. Army veteran or whatever. And the very first time, and whether it's a first grader or a 70-year-old, and people will ask you, have you ever killed anybody? And it's like, really? Why, what does it matter? And it does after a while. When a kid says it, you go, okay, that out of the mouths of babes. But when an adult says that something, you're like, really? Why would you even ask that? What does it matter? So, yeah, there's some really dumb questions that people ask.
You got one?
I don't know. Do you live with animals? Like stupid things like that. I mean.
I
Caught
believe
that in the
it.
back here, I'm
I
sorry.
believe it.
But yeah, that's stuff like that. You know, like the serious stuff about Africa, and I mean, it really annoys me actually when a college student asks me that. Like, you're in college, like I cannot live with wild animals. Like, I wouldn't be alive. But when I was in Mali, like, we lived in the city. I'd never been in the village in my entire life, and so I've never really actually seen a wild animal until I came to the zoo in America. So that's it.
I don't know if there's anything in particular the only thing that really gets under my skin probably is once an addict, always an addict, that kind of talk. Like, you hear that in treatment and in AA and NA, and when you are an addict or an alcoholic, it means one thing. Like, but when other people say it, they mean something totally different. Or like a thief is a thief kind of thing, you know? And so there are people that do have that mindset. And that's probably, that gets under my skin, you know? Like, you can't really ever change because an addict's an addict. So, and that's the first one that comes to my head.
I guess probably the one I find most annoying, and I actually see this a lot through material in my classes, actually, and it's, how do you tell if an addict's lying? Their lips are moving.
Yeah.
So I don't really like, not real fond of that as an aspect, but that's actually in some of my textbook literature that I read for my addiction studies. So yeah, I don't like that too much.
I'm sorry, I was giggling because I've heard it
You've
so
heard
many
it too,
times.
yeah.
It's just a great joke.
I think we have another question. in the
Sure.
back here.
You guys mind just going on the road again? Tell me, like, when your addiction started, like, when you moved here, and I'm sorry, I didn't get your all's, like, age.
Oh, okay. Do you want,
All of you.
Okay.
I missed your question.
like, what age did you enter the service and when did you come to Evansville?
I was 19 when I entered the service. I turned 21 in a combat zone on my birthday. And I finally came to Evansville permanently in 2004.
I came to the States when I was 12, and I'm 22 now, so.
My addiction started, I drank alcohol abnormally from the very beginning, and the first time I drank I was 14. And then I didn't start, experimenting with drugs until I was 17. And then I had kind of a significant trauma happen when I was 17. And so then it kind of drove the addiction into full-blown addiction until I was 27. 7.
Okay. My name is Jennifer. I'm 42. So my addiction started for me probably about the age of 11 when I was diagnosed with a seizure disorder, and I was heavily medicated through that. But by about 15, I was smoking pot daily. I've never really been much of a drinker, and it was more the pot, and then when the meth came along, it was the meth and the pot.
How old were you when you got sober?
Oh, I was 39 and a half.
I have a question I'd like to ask each of you, and that is, and I'll open it up to everybody here. Given that the title of this event is The Ties That Bind, even though each and every one of you have had different challenges, in what ways are we all similar at this point in time?
I'll let you guys start on that answer. I gotta think about it. Actually, everybody's looking at me, so I would guess. I know that all of us have felt isolated, but in hindsight, now that we've overcome tremendous, obstacles, we find a camaraderie, and in the ties that bind, we, gravitate towards people who are similar to us. So, how many of the people that you associate with are
Right, almost
addicts?
all of them.
So, nearly every person that I know is a vet or related to a vet, or, we find a common thread that, I guess I can't honestly foresee saying that I was an addict, but after my first deployment, I drank a lot. Almost lost my career because of it. But of the vets that I hang out with, we used to all drink. So we find that one thread that keeps us all together. Now I have friends that are also social workers that have absolutely nothing to do with veterans. So